The original draft of Attack on Titan was created in 2006, and it was a story where Eren didn't exist, the walls didn't exist, and Titans were even more impossible to kill. Initially, the idea was submitted to Weekly Shonen Jump, which is the famous magazine that at the time was publishing series like Naruto, Death Note, and of course One Piece, which is still going on. Like most submissions, the first draft of Attack on Titan was rejected, but despite that, there were other people who saw the potential. In this video, what we're about to do is examine the original story from 2006, and by the end you'll see what Attack on Titan could have looked like if the series had stuck to its original vision. On top of that, I'll also be showing you all the moments that ended up getting reused in the main series, including one major plot twist. Alright, so the original draft starts off with this Titan as it approaches a group of terrified looking soldiers. Seconds later, it then begins eating them one by one, and while that's happening we get an interesting backstory about how these monsters were created. 100 years earlier, there was some kind of man-made global crisis, and following that, a group of scientists and religious people decided that they had to do something. In order to protect themselves, they began the Mankind Destruction Operation with the hope of eradicating every other human on the planet. As part of this operation, they engineered the Titans from scratch, although these Titans are completely different to the ones we know from the anime. In the original draft, every Titan had the power to shapeshift into the form of someone they've eaten. Purely as an example, imagine that when Marco was eaten in season 1, the Titan that did it suddenly transformed into him and then just pretended to be Marco for the next few years. In the first draft, the Titans had this ability, making it significantly easier to infiltrate humanity, and as if that by itself wasn't bad enough, they didn't even have a typical weak spot in their neck. Instead, the Titans' only weakness was a special organ called the nucleus, which was always randomly located somewhere inside the Titan's body. In this opening scene of the manga, nearly every lost soldier is killed before they can find the nucleus, with the only survivor being a soldier called Murakumo. As a character, Murakumo is similar to Levi when it comes to his physical strength, but in terms of design he has a few things in common with Mikasa and Eren. Anyway, in this moment he tries to ambush the Titan by attacking it from behind, but at the last second it turns around, leaving him in a life or death situation. The story then flashes forward by a month, where it's revealed that humanity lives inside towns that are surrounded by large trees. If you're wondering why, it's because the scientists who created Titans didn't want to hurt the environment, and so they programmed Titans to view nature as sacred, while presumably viewing humans as evil. As a result, their programming doesn't allow them to destroy trees, explaining why the forest acts as a barrier defending humanity. Now, in this particular town, Murakumo is seen walking down the street, and as he looks around he notices that all the locals are afraid of him. One thing you need to know about this character is that he's a member of the Vanguard, which is the only branch of the military that goes outside the trees. Therefore, none of the locals actually saw what happened between Murakumo and the Titan. All they know is that a Vanguard squad was wiped out, and apparently this guy was the only survivor. From their point of view, you can understand why that doesn't sound realistic, and in their minds it's more likely that the entire squad was killed and that the man standing in front of them is a shapeshifting Titan. In fact, even Murakumo himself seems to not be 100% certain about what he is now. However, there is one person who believes that he's a normal human. As you can tell from her appearance, this character is literally Gabi, which is what I'm going to be calling her for the rest of the video, although just so you know, her name in the original draft is Tsubaki. In terms of her backstory, when she was younger, her dad was eaten alive by a Titan, and ever since then it's been her goal to join the Vanguard and get revenge. For that reason, she's been begging Murakumo to train her for the past month, since unlike the rest of the town, she doesn't believe that he's a shapeshifting demon. In spite of that, he initially refuses to turn her into a soldier, but as they keep talking, we find out that Gabi's dad was one of Murakumo's old friends. On top of that, he knows how she feels because 10 years ago his own dad was eaten by a Titan as well. And so in the end he does agree to train her if she practices swinging her blade 100 times every day. Soon afterwards, Murakumo then leaves to work in another part of town, and as he walks through the crowd he's quickly surrounded by a group of highly trained soldiers. These soldiers are known as the 5th unit, which is the squad that has the greatest military strength, and their mission is to find out if there's a Titan pretending to be a human. Earlier on, when Gabi kept talking to Murakumo, the entire time that was happening he was busy trying to fix this broken radio. Once he eventually got it working, his superior officer Takanami asked if they could switch places because he secretly wanted to access the radio for himself. Takanami then used the device to call the 5th unit, and he requested that they come to this town since, like everyone else, he suspected that Murakumo is a Titan. That's why they all surround him in this town center, and the soldiers quickly order him to drop his weapons. Interestingly though, at first Mirakumo seemed kinda shocked and afraid about the situation, but after looking at all the 5th unit members, his facial expression turns to anger. As Takanami begins to wonder what's going on, Mirakumo then whips out his sword, and thanks to this special mechanism, the blade catches fire. He then uses his flaming katana to literally slice through one of the 5th unit soldiers, cutting them in half, which is one example of his crazy physical strength. In response, the civilians all run away thinking that Mirakumo must be a Titan, but in reality, the reason he did what he did is because the person he sliced is an imposter. Earlier, I mentioned how Mirakumo's father was eaten 10 years ago, which is why in the present day, he got so angry when he saw a fake version of his dad as a member of the 5th unit. His father's body then abruptly transforms into a giant obese Titan, and it's revealed that in this world, Titans can make themselves larger by eating other Titans. What that means is that the obese Titan must have eaten its own kind to get that big, and as Mirakumo goes to sound the alarm, the other members of the 5th unit turn into Titans as well. This shows that at some point in the past, humanity's strongest soldiers were defeated and replaced by the enemy, and pretty soon these smaller Titans then start eating the larger one. While they're busy with that, Mirakumo gets ready for the battle, although Takanami tells him that they should abandon this town and head over to the nearest city by themselves. If they were to do that, it would mean leaving behind Gabi and all of the locals, but Takanami believes there's no other way to save themselves. In his mind, humanity can't win against the Titans, especially considering that even the 5th unit were taken down. Regardless, Mirakumo declares that mankind can win this fight, and to me, this scene reminds me of 2 different moments from the main series. The first scene came in episode 4 when Thomas took on a similar role to Takanami, only for Eren to take on the role of Mirakumo, as he passionately explains why they have a chance. Separately, in chapter 12 of the main manga, there was this panel where Eren was presented to a crowd of soldiers by Commander Pixis, and visually speaking it does look the same, with the main difference being that Mirakumo's hairstyle is more closer to Mikasa. Anyhow, on the battlefield, Gabi shows up to single-handedly face the Titans by herself, armed with 2 kitchen knives and nothing else. Almost immediately, her behavior catches the attention of one of the Titans, and as it lunges towards her, Mirakumo swoops in to save her at the last second. Following that, he orders her to stay behind while he goes to fight the Titan, and as that's going on, Takanami stays frozen in fear. Given that he's the superior officer, Takanami gets angry with himself for being so scared of the enemy. Gradually, his rage builds up to the point where he forces himself to join the battle, and soon afterwards, Mirakumo finds the Titan's nucleus. Takanami then deals the finishing blow by creatively using his weapon to shoot fire straight through the Titan's weak spot, exploding its nucleus in the process. From a distance, Gabi watches on, thinking that these 2 soldiers can save the town, but before she can properly celebrate, another Titan jumps forward and kills Takanami. Besides the fact that this was an incredibly traumatizing moment, things somehow manage to get even worse when she witnesses the Titan grabbing Mirakumo. At first, it squeezes his body till he coughs up blood, exactly like what happened to Eren's mother in their main series, and then it slowly brings him towards its mouth while Gabi watches. This sequence was definitely the blueprint for what ended up going down in episode 1, although you could argue the draft version is even worse considering that Gabi already lost a parent to the Titans, and now it's just, adding insult to injury by seeing her teacher get ripped to shreds as well. That being said, after biting Mirakumo's head off, you'd expect that this would be the end of things and that the Titans would just destroy the town, but somehow the remaining part of his body uses its katana to slice off the Titan's hand. In this panel, we can clearly see that the whole right side of Mirakumo is missing, but the left side swung the blade as if it was still alive. All of a sudden, Mirakumo then resurrects from the dead as his head and torso regenerates completely, and in the blink of an eye he fully transforms into the Attack Titan. In that sense, the draft version and the main series share the same plot twist of the MC coming back to life as a Titan shifter, although the one small change is that this original Titan can speak, which isn't something Eren was ever able to do in this form. Regardless, following his transformation, Mirakumo starts to have flashbacks to the time when he faced off against that Titan in the beginning. Just like the locals predicted, he was eaten in the same way as the other Vanguard soldiers, but inside the Titan's stomach he was still alive. As a quick side note before we continue, what's amazing about this panel is that Isayama decided to recreate it in chapter 117, which came out a whole 13 years after the original draft. In any case, after eating Mirakumo, the Titan began to scream as its body melted away, and when it finally disappeared, the only thing left was a fully regenerated Mirakumo. This is very similar to what happened with Zeke in part 2 of the final season, in that the Titan's own flesh was used to recreate the person inside it, but the reason this happened to Mirakumo is way different to anything we've seen in the anime, but I'll explain it at the end of the video. For now, all you need to know is that the Titan disintegrated because it ate Murakumo, and now in the present day, he has the power to shapeshift into his own version of the Attack Titan. He then proceeds to go on a crazy Titan killing rampage that must have been the prototype for Eren's rampage in Trust, and things are going well until one of the Titans attacks him from behind. Murakumo then has his arm completely ripped off, revealing the nucleus in his left shoulder, but he does manage to kill the Titan before it can damage his weak spot. With that done, only one of the 5th unit Titans was still standing, and luckily for Mirakumo, its own nucleus was visible for everyone to see. As long as this final Titan could be destroyed, then the entire town would be saved, but the problem is that the Titan has seen Mirakumo's weak spot as well. Unfortunately, he then wasn't fast enough to react to that information, and his nucleus gets crushed when the last remaining Titan bites down on it. Whenever the nucleus is destroyed, the Titan starts melting away almost immediately after, and so realizing that he's about to die, Mirakumo retaliates by using the last of his energy to destroy the other Titan's weak spot as well. This causes them to both melt away one after the other, and in my opinion, this panel here is reminiscent of the iconic moment from chapter 100 when Eren was about to crush Willy Tybur. I do find it interesting though that even with all that time passing, there are certain moments from the original draft that he keeps referring back to throughout the story. And another one is Gabby's eyes in this panel. Like, we all know we've seen this 100 times, Eren doing this exact expression. Anyway, moving on to the end, the original draft gives us an explanation for how Mirakumo initially gained his Titan powers. As we know, 100 years ago, Titans were programmed to see nature as sacred and pure-hearted, and as a consequence, pure-hearted things aren't allowed to be destroyed. This programming created a loophole in which pure-hearted people like Mirakumo couldn't be absorbed, explaining why that first Titan involuntarily gave its life to regenerate him back to normal. In situations like this, the Titan's power transfers to the human, and according to Gabby, it was the first time that humans had successfully fought back against the enemy. In her town specifically, the locals had built this gravestone to commemorate Murakumo's sacrifice, although Gabby was upset that they never actually got to train. In spite of that, it is still her goal to become the strongest soldier in the vanguard, and so after wiping away the tears, she gets ready to swing her blade 100 times, just like he told her to do. With that said, that was the original draft of Attack on Titan, and as you can tell, there were a ton of elements from this that did make it into the main series, but also some other things that were drastically changed. One of the things I liked about the draft is how the Titan's ability to shapeshift into humans, it meant that the civilians were basically always on edge, and that makes things a little bit more interesting when you contrast it to episode 1, where humans had gotten a little bit too comfortable with their position. Another thing that was cool is the way Murakumo regenerated his head and also the right side of his body. Usually it's a lot more of a slow, gradual process. I think this would have looked amazing in animated form, just an entire half of a body coming back to life in a split second. I think that would look really cool. Let me know in the comments down below what were the things in this draft that you thought were interesting or surprising, and as always, don't forget to like this video as it does help out the channel. If you're feeling generous, then I'd appreciate it if you also subscribe to the channel and share this video with a friend, and until the next one, peace out.